Hi, everyone. Okay, there's a moment that happens sometimes when you realize you've been watching the wrong thing, paying attention to the wrong details, obsessing over the wrong questions. And the thing you should have been noticing, it was there the whole time. Quiet, waiting, obvious once you see it, but completely invisible while you're looking elsewhere. Have you had that experience? That sudden shift in focus where everything rearranges itself? And what's interesting is how much energy gets spent on the wrong focus, how much time gets consumed by questions that don't actually matter, how much emotional bandwidth gets devoted to situations that have nothing to do with you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start somewhere else. So there's this statement: you're going to find out that their third party situation has changed. And there's so much packed into that. There's a promise of information coming. There's an assumption about what you're focused on. There's this idea that someone else's situation, someone else's circumstances, someone else's choices, that these things are central to your experience. But what if they're not? What if the whole premise is inverted? What if the thing that's actually changing has nothing to do with them or their situations or their third parties? My chest feels tight just holding this back. Wait, let me ask you something before we go further. Why do you care about their situation, about their third party, about what's changing or not changing in their life? Why is that the thing you're focused on? What does knowing that information actually give you? Sit with that for a second. Really sit with it. Because the answer to that question might be more revealing than whatever you're going to find out about them. Does that feel uncomfortable? That question about why you care? So let me approach this from a different angle without revealing everything. There's a pattern that exists in human behavior where people get fixated on external circumstances, on what's happening over there, on situations that involve them but aren't about them. And in that fixation, in that external focus, something gets avoided, something closer, something more immediate, something that would require looking at yourself instead of at them. My hands are cold right now, like the blood drained out. Because here's what I'm noticing without saying it directly. When you're focused on their third party situation, when you're watching for changes in their circumstances, when you're waiting to find out what's happening in their life, you're not focused on your own. You're not watching your own patterns. You're not addressing your own situations. And that displacement, that externalization of attention, it might be serving a purpose that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with what you're not willing to face about yourself. Can you feel that? That resistance to turning the focus inward. Wait, let me be more mysterious about this. There's something changing. That part might be true, but it's not their third party situation. Or maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that's not the change that matters. That's not the shift that's going to affect you. That's not the information that actually needs your attention. The change that matters, the shift that's occurring right now in this moment, it's happening in your awareness, in your perception, in your relationship to the whole question of why you're focused on them in the first place. My jaw just clenched without me realizing. Have you noticed how much energy you're giving to someone else's situation? How much headspace their choices are occupying? How much emotional bandwidth their circumstances are consuming? Tell me in the comments if you're aware of this pattern, because that energy, that attention, that focus, it's yours. It belongs to you. It could be directed anywhere. And the fact that it's directed at them, at their situations, at their third parties, that's a choice. Maybe not a conscious choice, maybe not a deliberate choice, but a choice nonetheless. And what if you directed it somewhere else? What if you focused on your own life with the same intensity you focus on theirs? What if you watched your own patterns with the same attention you watch their circumstances, what would you notice then? My throat feels constricted, like I can't quite breathe. So let me tell you something without telling you everything. The finding out part, the discovering what's changed, that's not going to give you what you think it will. Even if you do find out, even if their situation has changed, even if the information comes to you clear and unambiguous, it won't satisfy the thing you're actually seeking. It won't fill the gap you're trying to fill. It won't resolve the question you're actually asking, because the question you're actually asking, the thing you're actually seeking, it's not about them. It's about you. And no amount of information about their circumstances will answer a question about your worth, your value, your place in the story. Does that land? That distinction between the question you think you're asking and the question you're actually asking? Wait, I need to be careful here. I need to say this in a way that doesn't reveal too much but doesn't leave you lost. There's something about third-party situations that's seductive. They're concrete. They're external. There's something you can point to and say, there, that's the problem. That's the obstacle. That's the reason why. And in that concreteness, in that externality, there's relief. Because if the problem is out there, if it's their situation, if it's their third party, then you don't have to look at what's in here. You don't have to examine your patterns. You don't have to face your own contribution to the dynamic. My shoulders are so tense, they're touching my ears. Have you noticed that? How focusing on their obstacles is easier than facing your own. How watching their drama is more comfortable than addressing your own. Tell me in the comments if this feels familiar, because here's what I'm sitting with mysteriously. The change that's coming, the thing you're going to find out, it might not be what you expect. It might not even be about them. It might be about you finally seeing clearly, about you recognizing a pattern, about you understanding something about yourself that their situation has been obscuring. And that understanding, that recognition, it doesn't require their third party situation to change. It doesn't need external circumstances to shift. It just needs you to be willing to look, to really look at why you care so much about what's happening over there that you're not paying attention to what's happening right here. My chest just released a little. So the you're going to find out part, let me sit with that without spelling it out. Finding out implies information arriving, discovery happening, secrets being revealed. And there's anticipation in that. There's excitement or dread or curiosity. There's this sense that when the information comes, when you find out, something will change. But will it? Will finding out about their situation actually change anything about yours? Will knowing what's happening with their third party actually shift your experience? Or will it just give you new things to think about, new scenarios to imagine, new questions to obsess over? Because information without transformation is just information. It doesn't heal, it doesn't grow you, it doesn't actually change anything except what you know. And sometimes knowing more just means suffering more clearly. Does that make sense? That knowing isn't the same as growing. My hands just warmed up a little. Wait, let me tell you about situations without explaining too much. A situation is just circumstances. It's what's happening externally, and circumstances change. They're fluid. They shift. What's true today isn't true tomorrow. What exists now might not exist later. But your patterns, those are more stable. The way you relate to circumstances, the meaning you make of them, the stories you tell about them, those tend to repeat. And if you don't address the pattern, if you don't look at the relating and the meaning making and the storytelling, then when their situation changes, when you find out what's different, you'll just apply the same pattern to the new circumstances. The external will shift, but the internal will stay the same, and you'll be stuck in a different version of the same dynamic. Have you seen that pattern in yourself? How the details change, but the feeling stays the same? Tell me in the comments. My jaw unclenched and I can breathe easier. So here's what I can say without saying everything. Maybe their third party situation has changed. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe you'll find out. Maybe you won't. But here's what I know for certain. Whether it's changed or not, whether you find out or not, there's something else that needs your attention more. And that something, that thing that actually matters, it's not about them. It's not about their choices. It's not about their circumstances or their third parties or their situations. It's about why you're so invested in knowing, why you're so focused on their life instead of your own, why their situation has more of your attention than your own patterns, your own growth, your own healing. And that why, that reason, that underlying motivation, that's mysterious. That's personal. That's specific to you and your history and your wounds and your particular way of avoiding what needs to be faced. My throat opened and swallowing is easier now. Wait, I'm dancing around something here. Something central that can't be said directly. So let me try this way. What if the whole focus on their third party situation is a distraction? Not a malicious distraction, not something you're doing on purpose, but a psychological distraction. A way of keeping your attention out there so it doesn't have to be in here, because in here is uncomfortable. In here are questions you don't want to answer. In here are truths you're not ready to face. In here is the work that actually needs to be done. But out there, you can watch, you can wonder, you can wait for information, you can stay in anticipation mode without ever having to do anything except observe and react. Does that distinction land with you between observing their life and examining your own? My shoulders just dropped completely. So the changed part, let me be mysterious about this. Change is constant. Everything changes. Situations evolve. Circumstances shift. People make choices. Things end and begin and transform. That's just life, movement, flow. But the change that actually affects you, the shift that actually matters to your experience, that's not usually external. That's internal. That's in how you relate to what's happening, in what you make it mean, in how you respond versus react. And that change, that internal shift, it doesn't wait for their situation to change. It doesn't require external permission. It's available right now, in this moment. If you're willing to stop watching them and start seeing yourself, can you feel that possibility, that shift that's available without any external change? My whole body feels more relaxed now. So here's what I'll say without revealing everything. You might find out about their third party situation. You might not. It might have changed. It might not have. But whatever you find out, whatever's changed or hasn't changed, it's going to reveal something. Not about them, about you. It's going to show you why you care, why you're focused there, why their life has so much real estate in your mind. And that showing, that revealing, it might be uncomfortable. It might challenge the story you've been telling yourself. It might expose a pattern you'd rather not see. But it's also an opportunity to shift focus, to redirect attention, to start caring about your own life, your own patterns, your own growth with the same intensity you've been caring about theirs. And that shift, that redirection, that's the change that actually matters. Not what's happening with them, but what's happening with you right now in your awareness, in your willingness to look. Tell me in the comments if you can feel that shift trying to happen. If you're noticing where your focus has been versus where it could be. If you're willing to turn toward yourself instead of staying focused on them, because that willingness, that turning, that's where the real discovery is. Not in finding out about their situation, but in finding out about yours, about your patterns, about what you've been avoiding by staying fixated on them. My chest feels completely open now, and maybe that's the real message here. The real thing you're going to find out. Not that their third party situation has changed, but that your relationship to needing to know about it, that can change. That your focus on their life instead of your own, that can shift. That your pattern of external fixation as internal avoidance, that can be seen clearly and chosen differently. And that change, that shift, that clarity, it doesn't require any information about them. It just requires honesty with yourself, willingness to look, courage to see what you've been avoiding. Can you do that? Can you turn your attention inward with the same intensity you've been directing it outward? Tell me in the comments what you discover when you do, because that's the real finding out. That's the discovery that actually transforms. Not learning about their circumstances, but learning about your own patterns. Not knowing their situation, but knowing yourself. And that knowing, that's what changes everything. Truth isn't found in others' stories. It's discovered in your own silence. No predictions, just presence. Stay curious. Stay awake.